You've spotted the bull. He's 380 yards away, feeding along a timbered edge, completely unaware. The wind is quartering to you when you first check it, but you put the wind checker away. You plan your route and start moving. At 120 yards, a cow throws her head up and the whole herd blows out of the country. You never made a sound. You never skylined yourself. You never bumped them visually. The wind did it. And if you don't understand exactly why, it's going to happen again. Most elk hunters think about wind in one dimension. Don't let the elk smell you. But that's not a plan, that's a hope. Wind on a spot and stalk hunt is a two-system problem. You've got thermals driven by terrain and temperature, and actual wind driven by weather. Both are moving at the same time in potentially different directions, and both can burn a stalk independently. Most elk hunters don't understand either one well enough to plan around them before they take a step. I talk to elk hunters every single day, and oftentimes the topic of wind and thermals comes up, and they usually rank their wind and thermal knowledge on a scale of 2 to 3 out of 5, which makes this an important video for most elk hunters. This episode is going to break down the two wind systems you're managing on every stalk, how terrain shapes those systems, and how to build a stalk route around the wind before you ever start moving. Get this right and your odds on a spot and stalk hunt change completely. I've spent 34 years hunting and guiding western big game across open basins, canyon systems, dark country, and high alpine country, and 30 years as a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach, working with athletes at every level, including years competing as an elite athlete myself. What all of that experience has taught me is the importance of preparation. And the preparation here is what matters the most before the stalk starts. A lot of hunters still think that there's only one wind, but there are two, and you're managing both simultaneously on every stalk, every hunt. The first is thermals, predictable terrain-driven airflow caused by temperature changes throughout the day. Overnight, the air has cooled, right? And cold air is heavy, and so you get downhill thermals extending into the morning, right? Warm air is light. It rises uphill after the sun has warmed the slope and as the terrain absorbs that heat from the sun. The second is actual wind, right? Your prevailing wind, weather-driven airflow from a prevailing direction. This is the wind you check on a weather app or the wind that you can see moving through the grass on a ridge 400 yards away. It's less perfectly predictable than thermals, but definitely readable with the right tools and habits. Now on a stalk, those two systems run at the same time. You might have a steady northwest wind at your face while thermals are pulling your scent downhill into the drainage where the bull's standing. That's how you blow a stalk when everything looks right from the outside. You felt the wind, it was in your face, but thermals were running your scent straight down into that elk before you ever got there. Before you can manage both systems, you have to understand what terrain does to each of them here. Open basins are the most honest wind environment in elk country. What you see moving through the grass 300 yards away is roughly what you're standing in. Thermals run cleanly uphill and downhill. Prevailing wind moves across the basin in a consistent direction. This is the easiest terrain to stalk in because you can read and trust what the wind is doing with a reasonable confidence. Canyon systems are the most dangerous. Canyons funnel and compress wind. They create swirls at every bend, at tributary junctions, and anywhere the terrain changes direction. You can have a steady wind in your face near a canyon wall and a swirl pulling your scent directly to the canyon floor 80 yards from the bull. Never fully trust a canyon wind. Treat every terrain change as a potential swirl point and check your indicator before you move through it. Timber creates a lot of dead zones or pockets where the wind slows and stalls and redirects around tree trunks and canopy. The thicker the timber, the more chaotic the wind behavior is inside of it. In dark timber, your indicator might show almost no movement while thermal and light air currents are still carrying your scent at ground level towards the elk. Ridgetops and high spines are your most reliable stalking terrain. Wind there is directional and consistent, so use those as your approach route whenever the terrain allows it. Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the elk hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the elk hunting ebook series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations in Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post-Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory. It's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. Now, before you move a step, map the entire stalk the best you can. Not just the direction you need to go, the specific terrain you'll be moving through, what the wind is doing in each section of the terrain, and what thermals are doing at that time of day. You're not checking wind at your position and assuming it stays consistent all the way to the bull. That's the quickest way to get busted. You're thinking about every drainage, every timber edge, every terrain change between you and him, every bit of vegetation and trees and little dips in the ground. Then you plan the route that keeps the wind in your face for the entire approach, not just at the shot. Sometimes that means traveling an extra mile to circle completely around to the correct side of a bull. That's the right call. A 3-mile stalk with consistent wind in your face beats a 400-yard stalk with one bad swirl at 100 yards every single time. So identify your point of no return before you start moving. That's the distance inside which a blown stalk means the bull is gone, usually somewhere between 150 and 200 yards, depending on the terrain and how many elk are with him. Inside that distance, you can't quietly just back out. Once you cross that threshold, you're committed. So know exactly where it is on your approach and decide before you reach it whether the wind is still right to push on through. Even with the right route planned, you also need real-time information throughout the stalk. A wind indicator, right, is your best friend out there. A lot of times it never leaves our hand when we're getting into those types of situations. It's not a backup tool. It's a primary stalking tool. Check it every 20 yards sometimes, maybe at least every 50 yards. Check it every time the terrain changes. Check it every time you stop. You can also watch the terrain around you as you're moving. Grass bending, leaves blowing, brush moving. Those are the wind indicators that require no tool, and they work at distance that you can see through binoculars, right? If the grass 150 yards ahead of you is moving differently than what you feel at your position, that's information. Stop, read it, and adjust your route before you commit to moving through it. The mistake a lot of elk hunters make is checking wind once at the start of the stalk and then focusing entirely on closing distance. But wind shifts, thermals transition, terrain bends airflow. You're checking throughout the stalk from start to finish. Every time you feel the air on your face, change direction or intensity. The most dangerous window on a stalk is the thermal transition. This happens twice a day, right? Once in the morning as thermals shift from their overnight downhill pull to their daytime uphill rise. And again in the evening as they reverse back. The transition period typically runs 30 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on terrain, elevation, and cloud cover. During the transition, thermals are going to stall. They could swirl and they can change direction unpredictably. There's no reliable direction to keep your scent away from the elk because the thermals haven't really committed to a direction yet. Planning a final close approach during that window is going to be a high-risk move. You might get lucky, but a lot of times you won't. Evening stalks favor approaching from above before the thermal switch, right? Because your scent is traveling uphill, so you want to be above those elk where your scent's going to get carried away. You plan the timing of your approach to get inside 150 yards before that transition window opens. If you can't get there in time, you've got to hold your position and wait until you know exactly what it's doing, right? The 90 minutes you spend glassing while the thermals settle is better than the stalk you blow by pushing through a swirling transition time. Even the best planned stalks sometimes hit a point where the right call is to just stop. If the wind shifts on you inside 200 yards and you can't correct the route without exposing yourself, you've got to back out. Hunters who consistently close the distance on elk don't have better equipment or better calling. They have better discipline a lot of times. The discipline to plan the stalk before they move in accordance with the wind. They check the wind constantly while they do, and they stop when the wind tells them to stop. Wind is not a variable you get to manage while you're closing distance, right? By the time you're inside 150 yards and the wind changes, your options are already pretty limited. The work that determines whether a stalk succeeds happens before you take your first step. Read the terrain initially, understand your thermals, and commit to a route that keeps the wind right from start to finish. Get the wind right first, then close the distance. Now, if this episode made you realize you need a better elk plan this season, don't just watch another video and hope it all comes together. Build your plan right now. If you want to study my full system on your own, start with my elk hunting series of ebooks. If you want daily guidance, accountability, and a place to ask questions as season gets closer, join me on Team Backbone. If you want my eyes on your actual hunt plan, your maps, access, terrain, pressure points, wind, thermals, your actual hunt strategy, book an elk hunt plan audit with me and I'll help you get it tightened up before season. If the missing piece is your body, your legs, your lungs, or your ability to handle mountain miles in a heavy pack, check out my Backbone Unlimited training plans. It's never too early or late to get started. And if nutrition is where you need more focus, getting leaner, fueling long days, or building a better in-season food plan, check out my nutrition plans. The hunters who are ready in September are the ones who start tightening their plan right now. So go to backboneunlimited.com, choose the path that fits where you are right now, and I'll help you get started. Thanks for being here. I appreciate every single one of you. I'll see you in the comments. You know I read and respond to all of them. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.